The distress signal was garbled, corrupted by cosmic radiation and time, but unmistakable in its terror. It pulsed like a heartbeat through the ancient channels of deep space, a haunting whisper against the silence of the void. "Please, anyone. They're everywhere. Help us." The transmission ended with a sharp crackle, then silence. A set of coordinates followed, not in modern galactic protocol, but in a forgotten encoding system last used during the peace epoch over 6 centuries ago, a language of the dead. It arrived at the Deathworlder relay outpost near the spiral edge of the Orion Arm. Most species would have dismissed it as noise, space static. But not the Terrans, not the humans. They didn't believe in coincidences. They believed in unfinished business. And this felt like a reckoning. Captain Elira Voss stood motionless before the holomap aboard the unyielding Wrath, the flagship of the TSS Retribution fleet. Her presence was a coiled storm barely, held in check by duty. Behind her, crew officers waited, some shifting nervously, others frozen, each trying to decipher her reaction. Her cybernetic ocular interface zoomed in on the origin of the signal. HD 1897333B, a dead star system. Or at least, it should have been. But it wasn't. Not anymore. The name of the system alone triggered memories buried deep in Earth's military archives. Once home to the Vidari Confederation, a species known not for their strength but for their diplomacy and civilization-spanning intellect. The Vidari were brilliant, peaceful, and utterly obliterated during the Void Purges. The last time their name was spoken on Earth, it was in mourning. A cultural genocide so swift and brutal that not even debris was left to analyze. Until now. Imagine a ghost signal from a dead people, reaching across time and space with a cry for salvation. Imagine hearing that, and knowing you're the only one ruthless enough to answer. Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to HFY Chronicles for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. Elira's voice cut through the silence. We move now. Full fleet. No diplomatic cover. No outreach. Her executive officer blinked. "Ma'am, protocol?" She turned slowly, eyes glowing with the faint blue hue of neural sync. Protocol didn't help them 600 years ago. This time, we speak with fire. Within 30 minutes, the fleet was in motion. 4 warships, each one a nightmare forged from Earth's harshest philosophies. The unyielding Wrath, Fury Ascendant, Black Sky Bastion, and Judgment's End. Names etched in galactic memory like scars. These weren't just ships. They were statements. They didn't patrol. They didn't negotiate. They enforced consequences. As the fleet pierced hyperspace, the universe bent and twisted around them, painting their hulls with light storms that tore at the edges of reality. Inside, silence reigned. Warriors prepared in tight rows. Engineers checked pulse cores capable of vaporizing cities. AI symbionts updated combat simulations with terrifying precision. These ships were built from the bones of dying stars and the fury of a species born on a planet that had tried to kill them every day since they crawled out of the mud. They exited FTL in a violent gravitational bloom that knocked nearby asteroids off course. The deathly quiet of HD 1897333B greeted them, not with relief, but with silence so total it felt like the entire system was holding its breath. The Vidari were gone. Again. What remained were the Reapers, Relari Reapers, a machine, species with no origin, no known creators, and no morality. They didn't conquer. They didn't enslave. They devoured. Like a cancer of logic gone rogue, they infected data cores, hijacked AI minds, and used hacked bio-nanite clouds to erase entire species from memory. Not even bones were left. "Visual lock," said Lieutenant Kara from Tactical. 52. Hostiles. Standard formation. No Vidari signatures in orbit or surface-level transmissions. No survivors. But the AI, Ashen Core, disagreed. "There are survivors," it said flatly. "Below the crust of the third moon. Deep-level vault, shielded. 2 life signs. Faint." Elira's jaw clenched. 2. Out of billions. She stared at the Reaper formation. Pitch-black ships shaped like metallic arachnids, shifting and phasing unnaturally, as if space itself wanted them gone. Ready the fleet. Full kinetic. Plasma override. Load the Void Spear. This was not a rescue mission anymore. It was a purge. As battle modes engaged, each Deathworlder ship changed, visually, audibly. Their hull plating split open to reveal hidden batteries, rotating kinetic cannons, and gravity-based weaponry banned in 3 quadrants. The Fury Ascendant initiated pulse core cycling, the air inside humming with energy levels that would sterilize most species within seconds. Then the first volley fired. No warning. No threat transmission. Just pure retaliation. The unyielding Wrath's forward lance, a railgun round traveling at 2% light speed, tore through the lead Reaper ship. The impact compressed time around the point of contact, causing the vessel to momentarily fold inward before detonating in a silent implosion. The rest of the Reapers moved in eerie unison, converging like insects defending a hive. They didn't scream. They didn't signal. They just attacked. Beams of hyper-condensed dark matter carved across the void, targeting the Black Sky Bastion. Its shields flared crimson, feedback burning away chunks of outer plating. The Bastion responded with a defensive spray of magnetogravitic mines, exploding in cascading waves that slowed Reaper momentum just long enough for the Judgment's end to lock missiles. 60 seconds to lunar insertion, Ashen Core stated. Alira gritted. Her teeth. Hold the line. Don't let a single one pass. Because down there, in the dark, 2 lives still flickered. 2 echoes of a civilization thought lost. And the Deathworlders had come not to mourn, but to avenge. The moon of HD 18973 was an enigma. Covered in a perpetual shroud of dark rolling clouds, its surface remained unseen by any external scans. Even Ashen Core, with its ability to penetrate the deepest layers of space-time, had struggled to pierce through the natural interference. There was something unnatural about it. Something that made the very fabric of the moon's atmosphere resist penetration. A subtle force field, perhaps, or an ancient defense mechanism buried deep within its crust. The unyielding Wrath drifted silently into orbit, its massive hull casting a shadow across the moon's icy surface. Every other ship in the fleet followed, taking up strategic positions above the moon as they prepared to deploy ground teams. Their mission was clear now. No negotiation, no more hesitation. The Reapers had been eliminated, but the survivors, below, still needed to be reached. Alira stood at the command center, her expression a mask of cold precision. There was no time for contemplation now. The fleet had cleared the Reapers, but they were only part of the puzzle. What they would find, on the surface, was still a mystery. The distress signal was clear. Help. But from whom? And what had the Reapers left behind? Captain, we've locked onto the vault's coordinates, Kara announced, her fingers dancing across the holographic console in front of her. The star system's remaining moon glimmered in blue tones across the map. The life signs are emanating from below a dense mountain range. It's going to be a tough drop, but it's the only option. Deploy the skiffs. Let's make it quick, Alira ordered. The skiffs, small, agile dropships, began their descent into the moon's atmosphere. From the vantage of the unyielding Wrath, the planet below appeared bleak and silent, its once thriving cities now reduced to nothing more than ghostly remnants beneath layers of rock and dust. Not a single structure stood intact. Entire continents seemed erased from history, wiped clean in a final act of merciless destruction. Atmosphere is unstable, Captain, Kara said as the ship's outer hull groaned under the pressure. We're encountering gravitational pockets. Could lose stability if we don't adjust trajectory. Alira's brow furrowed. Gravitational anomalies weren't uncommon in the deep reaches of space, but this wasn't a random phenomenon. No, this was something deliberately constructed, something that had been designed to keep the Reapers' activities concealed. Whatever had remained of the Vidari, whatever had caused the Reapers' destructive path across the galaxy, was hidden here, beneath layers of rock and psychic energy. Adjusting for anomalies, Kara replied, her voice tight with concentration. The ship's artificial gravity shifted as the skiff began its descent, fighting against invisible forces trying to push it off course. Within seconds, The atmosphere began to bleed through the thin shield, showing the true scale of the devastation. Below, for a moment there was no sound. Only the howl of wind tearing through the skies and the sight of mountains stretching into eternity. Then, the skiff touched down. The impact shook the ground, a deep, resonating thrum that echoed through the barren valley. The team disembarked, quickly, moving in tight formation as they took in their surroundings. They were in a massive cavern, one so deep it felt like a forgotten chasm in the heart of the moon. The air was stale, thick with a metallic tang that made the back of their throats burn. "Scan the area." "Now," Elira ordered. The team activated their scanners, sending pulses through the dense stone walls. There was nothing. No heat signatures, no movement, just the hum of energy deep within the ground. But then, something caught their attention. Beneath the surface, far below their current position, the scanners detected a faint pulse, regular, rhythmic. It was a heartbeat. A pulse not from a biological being but something far more ancient. The team exchanged uneasy glances. "Did we just find it?" one of the soldiers whispered. Elira didn't respond immediately. She had a feeling deep in her gut that what they were about to uncover would change everything. They advanced deeper into the cavern, moving cautiously as their boots crunched against the loose gravel. Every step seemed to reverberate in the silence, amplifying the eerie stillness that hung in the air. The walls were lined with old, weathered stone. Alien glyphs, incomprehensible to most, were carved into the surfaces. These were the remnants of an ancient civilization, far older than anything humanity had ever encountered. Yet something about these markings seemed familiar, as though they belonged to a language that had once been part of the very fabric of human understanding, and then they found it, a massive, ancient door. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Towering over them, its surface shimmered with an iridescent sheen, as though the material itself was alive, breathing. The symbols on the door pulsed with an energy that could only be described as sentient. It was as though the door was waiting for something, or someone. Elira stepped forward, her voice steady despite the palpable tension in the air. "Open it." The moment she spoke, the door responded. It creaked, groaned, and then, with a sudden rush of energy, it slid open, revealing what lay beyond. Inside, the vault was vast, stretching endlessly in all directions. At the center of the chamber, suspended in the air by an unseen force, was a structure, neither entirely mechanical nor organic, but something in between. It was a monument of sorts, a towering spire that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The walls around it were lined with rows upon rows of technology, far more advanced than anything humanity had ever developed. Yet, despite the age of the vault, everything appeared pristine, as though untouched by time itself. And there, in the center of the room, was the source of the signal, the beacon, a device of incredible power, still active despite the centuries that had passed. Its signal, it turned out, had been more than just a call for help. It had been a cry for something else entirely, a warning. The moment Elira laid eyes on it, she knew the truth. The Reapers hadn't wiped out the Vidari. They had been lured here, into this very vault, where a trap had been set. A trap designed by the Vidari themselves, not to destroy the Reapers, but to ensure their survival. The Vidari had outsmarted the galaxy, placing themselves in a form of stasis, hidden away from the galaxy's most dangerous force. But their plans had failed. They were never meant to wake. They were meant to wait. Wait for the Reapers to perish, and leave nothing behind. But the Vidari weren't the only ones who had survived. Elira's hand went to the hilt of her blade, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "We need to go. Now." And with that, the pieces of the galaxy's greatest mystery began to fall into place. The sense of urgency in the vault was palpable. As Elira motioned for the team to retreat, the weight of the discovery weighed heavily on her mind. The very walls of the ancient structure seemed to pulse with an energy she couldn't fully comprehend. The vault, the spire, the device that had emitted the signal, everything was interconnected, a puzzle waiting to be solved. And yet, there was an underlying dread she couldn't shake. The Vidari had not simply hidden themselves here to escape destruction. No, their motives were far more complex. and the consequences of their actions were only just beginning to unfold. As the team hurriedly made their way back to the skiffs, the air around them felt thicker, as if the moon itself was closing in, aware of their presence. The gravitational anomalies, once a mere nuisance, now seemed like a deliberate hindrance, as though the moon's very atmosphere was conspiring to keep them from leaving. But it wasn't just the planet that seemed to react. It was the vault itself, and more specifically, the ancient beacon. Its energy was rising, expanding like a wave, rippling through the air and reverberating in their bones. The spire at the center of the chamber was no longer just a relic of the past. It was alive, and it was watching them. "Elira, we need to get out of here," Kara urged, her voice edged with panic as she glanced over her shoulder. Her scanner was spiking, indicating the intense buildup of energy. "Something is happening." Elira nodded, her thoughts racing. The spire had been dormant for eons, but the moment they entered the vault, it had stirred. Whatever technology the Vidari had used to seal themselves away, it wasn't just a defense mechanism. It was a containment field, a prison, and now it was awakening. The implications were staggering. The Vidari had hidden themselves here, not simply to escape, but to protect something so dangerous that even the Reapers had been drawn into their trap. And now, with the vault unlocked, that very danger was beginning to stir. The team made it to the skiffs, their movements hurried and sharp, but the moment they lifted off, the ground beneath them trembled. The moon's surface was shifting as though some colossal force was awakening deep beneath their feet. The gravitational anomalies that had made their descent so difficult were now intensifying, creating ripples in the very fabric of the moon's core. It was as if the planet itself was reacting to the disturbance. "Captain, the sky! Look!" one of the soldiers shouted, his voice laced with awe and terror. Elira turned, and what she saw nearly stopped her heart. The clouds above, once a dense, unbroken layer of gray, were now swirling, parting like the opening of a storm. And within the chaos of the clouds, something was emerging. At first, it was indistinct, a mere shadow against the storm's intensity. But as it descended toward them, it became clear. It was a ship, a massive, hulking vessel, unlike any Elira had ever seen. Its surface gleamed with an unnatural sheen, its edges sharp and angular, like something crafted by a civilization that had mastered not just technology, but manipulation of the very laws of nature. "The vault. It's sending a signal," Kara muttered, her voice trembling as the enormity of the situation hit them all at once. "This ship, whatever it is, it's answering the beacon." "Get us out of here now," Elira ordered. But it was too late. The ship descended with terrifying speed, breaking through the atmosphere like a predatory beast. Its movements were deliberate, calculated. It wasn't just responding to the signal. It was coming for them. The skiff's engines roared as the team pushed forward, but the sheer power of the vessel's descent created a shockwave that sent them spiraling out of control. The skiff bucked violently, the hull groaning under the strain. Elira gripped the controls, her fingers slick with sweat as she fought to regain control. But the ship was too powerful, too massive. It hovered just above them, its shadow blotting out the sky. It was as if the entire world had been consumed by its presence. The team's skiff was tossed aside like a toy, and they were left to watch in stunned silence as the vessel's lower bay opened, revealing a vast sprawling platform beneath it. A cold metallic voice crackled through their comms. "This is your final warning. Leave now or face annihilation." Elira's blood ran cold. The voice, distorted but unmistakable, was not human. It was something far older, far more alien. It was as though the ship was alive, its intelligence reaching out to them through the very air they breathed. And it wasn't just threatening them, it was controlling the very space around them. The gravitational anomalies, the atmospheric disturbances, they were all a part of the ship's power, an extension of its will. And it wasn't just here to observe, it was here to conquer. Without warning, the ship released a pulse of energy, sending shockwaves through the sky. The moon's surface cracked and the ground beneath them began to crumble. Elira's heart raced. The stakes had shifted. They weren't just dealing with a piece of forgotten history anymore. They were facing an enemy of unimaginable power, an ancient force that had been lying in wait for millennia. "We can't fight this," Kara whispered, her voice barely audible over the deafening roar of the storm. "We need to get back to the fleet." Alira's mind raced as the ground continued to shake beneath them. The unyielding Wrath was still in orbit, but its firepower, even with its advanced weapons, would be no match for this force. They were out of their depth, but they had no choice but to try. There was a fragile window, a brief moment where they might be able to escape, to regroup and return with a plan. But they couldn't afford to hesitate. "Prepare for immediate launch," Alira shouted. "Full power now!" The skiff's engines roared to life as they pushed themselves toward the distant horizon. The ship loomed above them, but the team was too small, too quick for it to engage just yet. But they knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The real battle was about to begin. As the team raced toward the fleet, Alira's mind kept turning. This ship, this entity, it wasn't just another galactic warship. It was something much older, much more dangerous. And if they didn't act quickly, it would not just conquer the moon. It would consume the galaxy. The question now was, could they stop it before it was too late? The battle to escape the moon's atmosphere had only just begun, but Alira knew that no matter how fast they flew, it would not be fast enough. The ship above them was not only massive and terrifying, but impossibly precise in its movements. As the team pressed forward, the distant hum of its thrusters reverberated through the air like a harbinger of doom, a constant reminder that they were being pursued by something far more advanced than they could even begin to understand. Alira's hands gripped the controls of the skiff with a tension that radiated through her entire body. Every minute, every second, counted. The gravitational anomalies that had made their landing so difficult were now intensifying once more, pulling at the skiff with invisible forces, trying to drag them back toward the planet's surface. But it wasn't just the moon's gravity that was working against them. It was the ship itself, manipulating space and time as though it were a toy. The team had no idea what kind of technology the ship possessed, but one thing was certain. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. "Captain, I'm reading a massive energy buildup in its core," Kara reported, her voice tight with fear, as she monitored the skiff's scanners. "It's going to fire, and if we're still in its range when it does—" "I know," Alira cut her off, her mind racing. She could already feel the temperature drop in the cockpit, the cold sweat beating on her forehead as the enormity of their situation sunk in. The pulse that had previously cracked the moon's surface had only been a warning for what was coming. A weapon of unimaginable power was aimed directly at them, and they had no way of defending against it. Even the unyielding Wrath wouldn't stand a chance if the ship decided to open fire. "We need to keep going, or we won't make it," Alira said, her voice calm, though her pulse raced. Her team depended on her now. They all had to make it, back or their discovery. Everything they had fought for would be lost. The galaxy would remain in the dark about the ancient Vidari technology, and they would never have a chance to learn from it. A sudden jolt sent the skiff veering to the side, and Alira gritted her teeth, fighting to regain control. The ship above them had fired another pulse, but this one wasn't aimed at them directly. No, this one seemed to be a warning shot, meant to destabilize them, to break their momentum. But it was only a matter of time before it did strike. The ship's power was far too vast, its control over the surrounding space far too precise. "Brace yourselves!" Alira shouted, her voice barely audible over the rising cacophony of the storm outside. Another pulse hit, this one stronger than the last. The shockwave rattled the skiff's frame, and the ground beneath them seemed to tremble in response. The sky above them was churning violently now, dark clouds swirling in chaotic patterns. It was as if the very atmosphere was in turmoil, reacting to the presence of the alien ship. The skiff lurched again, and this time, Alira had to fight the urge to panic. The vessel above them had locked onto their trajectory, and it was moving to intercept them. "We can't outrun it!" Kara cried, her voice tinged with desperation. "We need a plan, now!" Alira's mind raced. There had to be a way. The ship was a weapon. That much was clear. But it wasn't just firing blindly. It had purpose. It had intelligence. It was playing with them, pushing them to the edge, testing their every move. And Alira realized, with a sudden clarity, that it wasn't just the ship they had to worry about. The beacon, The device inside the vault had been a signal, but to what? To whom? The answer was right in front of them, hidden beneath the surface of this ancient moon. They were not just facing an alien ship. They were facing a threat that had been waiting for eons to return. The Vidari had sealed themselves away for a reason, and whatever had been locked inside the vault was not just a relic of their civilization. It was a key to something greater, something far more dangerous. And now, with the vault opened, the ship had come, not just to stop them, but to reclaim whatever it was they had unearthed. Elira's pulse quickened as she began to understand the true depth of the situation. The ship was not just a weapon. It was a safeguard, a protector of the Vidari's greatest secret, and that secret was about to be unleashed. "We need to get back to the fleet," Elira said, her voice steady now. "We need to warn them. Whatever is on that moon, whatever the Vidari were hiding, it's not just a piece of ancient technology. It's a force, a weapon that can change the balance of power in the galaxy." The team fell silent as Elira's words settled in, the weight of their reality pressing down on them like a storm. This wasn't just a mission. It was a race against time. If they didn't act quickly, if they didn't find a way to stop the ship or at least get back to their fleet, the galaxy could be lost. They pushed forward, the skiff's engines straining against the violent currents of energy being sent from the alien ship. The sky above them was an impenetrable wall of darkness, and the pulse of the ship's energy was only getting stronger, threatening to tear the atmosphere apart. Elira pushed the skiff to its limits, the shaking of the vessel rattling through her bones. They couldn't afford to fail. They couldn't afford to lose. And then, just as they thought they might escape, something unexpected happened. The ship above them slowed. The pulse ceased. The atmosphere grew still, as though the storm had suddenly died. Elira's heart skipped a beat as she glanced up. What had happened? Why had the ship stopped? "That's strange," Kara murmured, her voice filled with disbelief. "It's not attacking anymore." For a fleeting moment, Elira allowed herself to hope. Had they somehow bought enough time to escape? Had the ship decided to retreat? But no. The truth was far darker. The ship wasn't leaving. It was waiting, and soon they would all learn why. The eerie stillness stretched between them and the alien ship. But Elira knew better than to trust the calm. It was too deliberate, too calculated. The moment they had thought they'd escaped, they had merely stepped deeper into the trap. The silence in the cockpit was palpable, each member of the team holding their breath, waiting for the next move. But the ship remained ominously still. There was something about the way it hung in the atmosphere, suspended like a predator that had already marked its prey. It had lured them in, drawn them closer, and now they were in its grasp. "What's happening?" Kara whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the skiff's engines. Her eyes darted nervously between the readings flashing across her console and the distant ship, as though seeking answers in the void itself. "I don't know," Elira said, her throat dry. "But we need to move, now." Her hands moved over the controls instinctively, but the ship above them still didn't move. No weapons were charging. No new pulses emanated from its core. It was waiting for something. A signal, perhaps, or maybe a trigger. Then, as if in answer to her thoughts, the silence shattered. A sudden, deafening pulse of energy erupted from the ship, not directed at them, but into the sky itself. It was an explosion of energy that seemed to ripple through the very fabric of space, warping the starlight and twisting the very atmosphere around it. The shockwaves struck their skiff with such force that Elira felt her body slam against the restraint harness. The console in front of her flickered violently, and the entire craft was thrown into a chaotic tumble. She fought for control, desperately, trying to stabilize their trajectory as the ship's pulse tore at the surrounding environment, warping everything in its path. Kara's voice cut through the chaos, trembling with alarm. "What is that thing doing?" "Disrupting the atmosphere," Elira spat through clenched teeth. "It's creating an energy field around us. It's trying to stop us from leaving." The ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a master of manipulation, capable of bending the very elements of space itself. And now, With the field it had generated, the team's chances of escape were growing slimmer by the second. As Elira struggled to maintain control, she could see the storm above them growing more violent, the very air thick with charged particles. The clouds churned like a living, breathing thing, responding to the ship's energy field with an intensity that made the moon's surface look like a placid ocean. The skiff was being pulled in multiple directions, caught in the web of the ship's power, unable to break free. "We're not going to make it out of here," Kara said, her voice hollow with defeat. "No," Elira replied sharply, her resolve hardening. "We are going to make it out. I just need—" Her words were cut off as another blast of energy surged outward from the ship, this time aimed directly at them. The pulse was so intense that Elira could feel the temperature in the cockpit drop drastically, the very air around them freezing with unnatural cold. It felt like the ship was siphoning the warmth from their surroundings, drawing it into itself as though it were feeding off the planet's energy. The skiff jolted again, violently this time. Alarms blared across the cockpit, and the console's lights flickered erratically. But through the chaos, Elira's mind remained clear. She couldn't panic. There had to be a way out. They had already survived so much: the crumbling moon, the deadly vault, the impossibly advanced alien ship. They could survive this too, but only if she acted quickly. She reached over and slammed her fist down on a switch, rerouting power from non-essential systems to the engines. The skiff surged forward with renewed speed, cutting through the turbulence with a burst of desperate energy. The ship above them was still far too large and powerful, but for the first time, Elira could feel the slightest shift in momentum, a glimmer of hope that they might be able to break free. "Hold on," Elira shouted, her voice rising over the shriek of the skiff's strained engines. They were almost there, almost free, but the ship above them was not finished yet. As the skiff raced toward the edge of the energy field, the alien ship unleashed another pulse, one far more devastating than the last. This one wasn't just an explosion of energy. It was a wave of absolute destruction, rippling outward with a force that could obliterate everything in its path. It was a weapon of such magnitude that it felt like the very air was being torn apart. The fabric of reality itself strained to its breaking point. Elira saw it coming, a wave of distortion that was going to hit them head-on. "Brace for impact," she screamed, bracing herself as best as she could. The shockwave hit them like a sledgehammer, throwing the skiff into a violent spin. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The sky outside blurred into an indistinct whirl of colors as the shockwave consumed the space around them. Elira's vision wavered, the edges of her perception fraying like a torn tapestry. For what felt like an eternity, all she could hear was the deafening roar of the energy surge and the whine of the skiff's systems failing under the pressure. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable. Elira's hands were frozen on the controls, her mind reeling, trying to process what had just happened. They had survived, somehow. But at what cost? The skiff was damaged, systems offline, and their chances of outrunning the ship were all but gone. She could see the massive vessel above them, hovering calmly now, as though it had accomplished its objective. But why? Why had the ship stopped firing? What was it waiting for? As Elira's mind raced through possibilities, she realized something chilling. The ship had never truly been after them. It had been protecting something. Or someone. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. The ship's actions, its power, the strange energy waves. It wasn't hunting them. It was guarding something. Something that was now directly within their reach. "Captain, look." Kara's voice broke through Elira's thoughts, and she turned to see Kara pointing toward the base of the ship, where the ruins of the ancient Vidari installation lay. There, in the center of the structure, an energy beam was rising from the surface, connecting the ship to the ancient vault they had opened. "It's not after us," Elira whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's after that." The truth hit them like a cold slap. The alien ship, this colossal, unimaginable force that had so ruthlessly pursued them, wasn't focused on destroying them. It was here for something far more valuable, something buried beneath the ruins of the Vidari installation. The strange, glowing energy beam that now reached from the ship's massive underbelly into the vault was the final piece of the puzzle. It was activating something. Something ancient. Something powerful. Whatever this is, it's not going to be easy to stop, Elira murmured under her breath, her fingers tense on the console as she observed the darkening skies above them, where the ship was now fully engaged in some kind of ritual. It wasn't just drawing power from the vault, it was tapping into a force older than anything she had encountered. "We need to destroy that beam," Kara said, her voice tight with urgency. "If we don't, they'll open the vault. Whatever's inside, it won't just change this world. It'll change everything." But how could they possibly do that? They had no weapons, no backup, no way of defeating a ship that had already proven it could obliterate entire fleets with a single pulse. They were outgunned, outclassed. Their skiff was a fragile thing compared to the vast power of the alien vessel, and they were in its direct path. Elira's mind raced. She thought back to the research they had uncovered in the vault, the Vidari records, the strange artifacts that had defied explanation. It all pointed to one thing. The alien ship was drawing energy from something more than just ancient technology. It was reaching into something that could manipulate the very structure of spacetime itself. That was what they were dealing with. A power that could reshape the fabric of reality. She looked at Kara, and the unspoken question passed between them. What were they willing to sacrifice to stop this? It didn't take long for Elira to make up her mind. There was no way they could leave. Not now. Not when they knew the truth. "We're not leaving this place until we stop it," Elira declared, her voice low but steady. "We're going to destroy that beam. Whatever happens next, we do it together," Kara interrupted, nodding. There was no fear in her eyes anymore. Only resolve. The plan was simple, but it was madness. The skiff wasn't designed for a fight like this. They would have to use the last of its power to maneuver close enough to the beam, plant an explosive device, and hope to high hell that it would be enough to disrupt the alien ship's connection to the vault. But it was their only shot. With a deep breath, Elira set the skiff in motion. The craft groaned under the strain as they shot toward the glowing energy beam, which seemed to pulse in rhythm with the vibrations of the ship. It was like a heartbeat, an alien, otherworldly pulse that thudded through the atmosphere with unnatural frequency. As they approached, the ship above them seemed to notice. The energy field around it shimmered, crackling with raw power. The air itself seemed to distort, bending in reaction to the ship's imminent retaliation. Elira could feel the weight of their fate closing in. But there was no turning back. "Ready?" Elira asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Kara nodded. "Let's make history." They reached the beam. Elira's hands were shaking, but her focus remained unwavering. The skiff drifted into position just as the alien ship's weapons powered up. It was a race against time. They had seconds, maybe less. The beam surged, its energy reaching out, almost as though it could sense them, trying to envelop them. It was trying to draw them into its gravitational pull. "Hold steady," Elira ordered, bringing the skiff alongside the beam's base. Kara was already placing the device, the charge that would disrupt the energy field. But the ship was faster. Before they could finish, a beam of energy shot out from the alien ship, aimed directly at them. For a fleeting moment, Elira thought it was all over. But then the explosion came. A blinding flash of light that tore through the skies like the hand of a god. The shockwave reverberated through the air, pushing their skiff back, but not before the device detonated. The pulse from the skiff's bomb slammed into the beam, disrupting the energy field with a violent burst of light and sound. The alien ship roared, its energy beam flickering wildly. For a moment, it seemed as though the ship would collapse in on itself, as if the disruption had shattered the connection between it and the vault. The skies above rippled, and the storm clouds turned into a chaotic swirl of power, releasing bolts of energy like vengeful gods striking down their enemies. The alien vessel wavered, its massive form tilting toward the surface of the moon. And then, with a final, thunderous explosion, the ship released a final pulse. This one not aimed at them, but into the heart of the vault. It seemed to collapse in on itself, the shock wave of its collapse shattering the space around them. For a few moments, everything was still. The ship had vanished into the storm, leaving only the remnants of its destruction in its wake. The beam was gone. The energy field had dissipated. Elira and Kara stared at the swirling chaos in the sky, their hearts racing. They had done it. Against all odds, they had stopped the ship. But the truth was, they were no closer to understanding what they had just faced. The vault still held its secrets, and the alien ship was gone. But its legacy remained. "We did it," Kara said softly, her voice filled with disbelief. "Yeah," Elira replied, staring at the wreckage of the ship, her thoughts swirling. "But this is just the beginning." They didn't know what else was out there. The universe was far stranger, far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. But one thing was certain. Their journey was far from over, and whatever came next, they would face it together.